The new Warhammer 40k Nightbringer model will soon be in my hands. Let's look for inspiration. Uh-oh, I forgot I need to upgrade my Necron bases. Alright, let's follow this recipe for Wasteland bases. Welcome, my name is Hubert, and today I try a new way to paint vibrant wasteland bases. But let's do a bit more than that. Together we might understand how following a simple recipe can teach us a lot. I've been painting my Warhammer 40k Necron bases in a very simple way so far. Dark red base, then orange oxide pigment powder, using varnish as a fixer. I've been satisfied with them, but it feels a bit messy and lacks contrast in my opinion. I'll be focusing on painting only, since everyone has their own method for creating terrain and texture. But for today's video, I'll take the opportunity to try two ways of doing so. I'll do one base with earth texture only, and the other with PVA glue and sand. For this recipe, you'll need a few ingredients. You will find the list in the description. Dark Prussian blue, black red, dark rust enamel liquid pigment, light rust enamel liquid pigment, and Tenebrous grey. These are all from AK Interactive, so if you want other brand equivalents, just ask. I couldn't find the AK Dark Rust liquid pigment anywhere in stores, so I went with an acrylic effect instead, and you will understand why Enamel are so good for doing special effects. So, I have two bases ready to be painted. On a side note, I usually glue the model to the base before adding texture or sand. It lets the ground build up around the feet, so the model feels anchored in the scene instead of placed on top of it. It adds weights to the models. Of course, I subassembly as much as I can with this in mind. So the instructions I'm trying to follow say to start with the first layer of dark Prussian blue, and as I'm in the process of following this recipe blindly, I execute myself. But I'm wondering, why start an orange base with blue? If I had to guess, this has to do with the color temperature. This might help get cooler shadows once we're done with the rest, I hope.
1. It cools the shadows. 2. It protects saturation. When orange sits over blue, the midtones stay vibrant instead of going muddy. The blue peeks through only in the deepest cracks, giving depth without killing the heat.
Interesting. I wasn't sure if this step was relevant for the way I built the terrain, but now I understand. Let's get to the next step, dry brushing black red to add even more depth to it. You've been a few to ask me for dry brushing tips, so here it is. I simply moisturize my brush just a little bit beforehand. It must just be a little moist, not wet. Then I make sure I have a very little amount of paint on it, then rub it on a dry brush palette. And I make sure to insist on this. Most of the paint must come off so you can barely see any results when brushing the model. And it's okay because we are dry brushing here, not painting. So just brush very gently, no pressure, but you can go fast. And over time, it adds up. The main goal is to prevent brush stroke from showing. Once done, time for some special effects. I couldn't get my hands on AK Dark Rust liquid pigment. If you know any shops selling this stuff in Europe, you're welcome to share it. So I got some acrylic rust effects as a replacement. It's supposed to dry dusty, so let's see if this works. And surprise! It doesn't really dry with the dusty finish I was looking for. It's okay because next step is going to change everything. Time to apply some real enamel effects with AK Light Rust liquid pigment. Also, let's learn a bit more about enamels. I'll just dilute it a bit with white spirit, slap it on, then come back later for a quick reductive step. So, why do I have to use enamels to get that dusty look I'm looking for when making desert bases?
Effects like AK Light Rust cram in a lot of very fine pigment but relatively little resin. When the solvent evaporates, there isn't enough binder to fully wet the pigment, so it dries slightly exposed. That exposed pigment scatters light, which your eye reads as dust.
And I'm glad the previous acrylic layer didn't do so good because I got to learn something. Adding more or less solvent, here white spirit, can have an effect on how it dries and looks in the end. By the way, varnishing beforehand also affects how your enamel behaves. Gloss varnish makes it sharper, matte varnish makes it sort of bloom and soften. But be careful when doing dusty effects like this with enamels, don't varnish afterwards. And you will lose that dusty look and also some of its vibrance. And I love how this enamel looks so far. I might have waited too long before the reductive step, as it's not being really effective, but that's okay. We have one last step to do.
Unleash the clicks of approval, unleash the like, subscribe, and become one with Hobus's data feed.
Dry brushing Tenebrous Gray. And with this, you'll maybe start wondering why I bothered with all these previous steps before going with enamel and just dry brushing this. I'll explain in the end, but I'm sure some of you already have an answer. This step is the most satisfying. As you can see, dry brushing everywhere reveals all the details and texture. This, added to the dusty finish, will make for a solid result, I'm sure. Before I finish by painting the trims black this time and adding a few grass tufts, let's start reflecting on this recipe. I followed this recipe blindly, and by the way, they were given by a dear viewer who contacted Hired Gun Studios on Instagram. Thank you for that. This is a straight up upgrade from my previous recipe. I was using dry pigments and this used to be a messy process. I put pigments everywhere. It was hard to clean off. Most of all, it was hard to control. At first, I was planning on just blindly following the instructions, but with each new step, I started wondering how each layer or product was justified. Did some research, and not only I understood the recipe, I learned a few more things about enamel and the thought process behind each step, and that's cool. Alright, let's have a look. Really happy with the results, and even more happy with how simple it is. But why did I use blue and red before using enamels? Well, it's because the original recipe is made to be used with a specific 3D printed rock that have a negative slope. You see these rocks? They offer much more space for showing more of the previous layers, going from bright and warm orange to dark and cold blue. So if there was one lesson to learn from this video, it's this. Following recipe is great to learn and paint stuff, but it's when you start questioning the process that you truly learn yourself, and even learn about other things. Alright, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'll see you in 2 weeks for another basing project while I talk about starting a new army. So until next time, happy painting!